Do you even belong in a room like this? The question drifted across the ballroom so smoothly that for a moment, nobody realized how cruel it truly was. Then came the silence, the kind that made crystal glasses feel heavier in people's hands. The annual Reed Foundation Winter Gala glittered beneath 12 massive chandeliers inside the Astoria Imperial Hotel in Manhattan. Gold light reflected across polished marble floors. Waiters in black uniforms moved carefully between tables worth more than most people's yearly salaries. Women in designer gowns laughed softly behind diamond-covered fingers while men discussed mergers, oil contracts, and political donations over $1,000 bottles of Bordeaux. At the center of it all stood Nathaniel Reed, 44 years old, 6'2", perfect posture, silver threaded through dark hair at the temples, the kind of face magazines called disciplined, the kind of voice people obeyed before realizing they had agreed to something. CEO of Reed Capital, billionaire, Wall Street legend, the man who could make entire companies disappear with one signature. And tonight, every eye in the ballroom followed him the way people watched a storm moving over the ocean. Olivia Carter kept her head slightly lowered as she carried a silver tray through the crowd. 3 champagne flutes balanced perfectly in one hand. Calm steps, straight spine, no wasted movement. Most guests never looked directly at the waitstaff. They looked through them. Olivia preferred it that way. Invisible people heard everything. Table 12 needs another bottle, whispered another server as she passed by. Olivia nodded once. I've got it. Her voice was soft, controlled, almost too calm for someone working a 12-hour shift in 4-inch heels. The ballroom orchestra shifted into a slower jazz arrangement while snow drifted softly against the giant windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. Outside, New York glowed white and silver beneath December lights. Inside, warmth and money covered everything like perfume. Olivia approached the VIP table near the center platform where Nathaniel Reed sat, surrounded by investors, politicians, and attorneys. Men who spoke quietly because they were used to being listened to. She reached forward carefully to refill a champagne glass when one of the guests leaned back unexpectedly. The tray tilted slightly, just enough for a thin line of champagne to splash across Nathaniel Reed's suit sleeve. Gasps fluttered across the table. Olivia froze instantly, not from panic, from awareness. Nathaniel looked down slowly at the dark stain spreading across the cuff of his midnight blue tuxedo. Custom-tailored, probably worth more than Olivia's monthly rent. The table went silent. Then Nathaniel laughed once. Short, sharp, dangerous. Interesting, he said calmly, lifting his arm slightly. This jacket flew in from Milan yesterday. A few nervous chuckles spread around the table. Olivia immediately reached for a linen cloth. I apologize, sir. Her voice remained level. Nathaniel studied her face for the first time that evening. Blonde hair tied into a simple low knot. Pale skin. Clear gray-blue eyes that didn't dart away the way most people's did around him. That irritated him immediately. Careful, he said quietly enough for nearby tables to lean closer. Some things in this room cost more than mistakes can afford. More laughter. Softer this time. Colder. Olivia dabbed the sleeve gently. Yes, sir. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. Actually, he glanced around the ballroom, sensing a tension building the way experienced performers sensed an audience. Let's ask something more important. He turned fully toward her now. Do you even belong in a room like this? Several guests smiled awkwardly. One woman near the end of the table looked down at her wine glass. Another man smirked openly. Olivia stopped moving. The cloth remained lightly against Nathaniel's sleeve. Somewhere behind them, silverware clinked against china. The orchestra continued playing, but quieter now. Nathaniel expected embarrassment. Maybe tears. At minimum, apology mixed with humiliation. Instead, Olivia slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. Completely calm. No, sir, she answered softly. The corner of Nathaniel's mouth twitched upward in victory. Then Olivia finished her sentence. But neither does dishonesty. The ballroom stopped breathing. Even the orchestra faltered for half a second. Nathaniel's expression did not change immediately. That made it worse. Olivia stepped back slightly, setting the linen cloth onto her tray with perfect precision. No anger, no shaking, just silence. Across the table, one of the attorneys straightened in his chair almost imperceptibly. Another guest exchanged a quick glance with someone beside him. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" he asked quietly. Olivia held his gaze only a moment longer before lowering her eyes again professionally. "Your champagne has been replaced, sir." Then she turned smoothly and walked away through the ballroom as if nothing had happened. Behind her, whispers began spreading like smoke through the crowd. Nathaniel watched her disappear between tables, something unfamiliar tightening slowly beneath his ribs. Not anger exactly. Worse, loss of control. Because for the first time in years, someone had stood in front of him publicly without fear. And somehow she had made him feel small. The whispers followed Olivia Carter through the ballroom, like smoke curling beneath a locked door. She could feel the eyes on her even without looking back. Investors paused mid-conversation. Servers exchanged nervous glances near the kitchen entrance. Somewhere behind her, someone quietly asked, "Who was that girl?" Olivia kept walking. Calm steps. Balanced tray. Straight shoulders. The heavy ballroom doors opened into the service corridor where the sound of jazz instantly softened beneath humming ventilation and distant kitchen noise. Stainless steel counters reflected bright white light instead of chandeliers. The smell of expensive perfume disappeared beneath coffee, butter, and warm bread. Real life lived back here. Olivia. The sharp whisper came from Denise, the floor manager. 50 years old. Perfect lipstick. Permanent stress lines around her eyes. She grabbed Olivia gently by the elbow near the drink station. "Tell me you did not just say something insane to Nathaniel Reed." Olivia set the tray down carefully beside the sink. "I answered his question." Denise stared at her in disbelief. "That man donates more money to this hotel than the owner." "I know. People lose careers over less." Olivia reached for a fresh tray of champagne glasses. "Then I suppose I should be more careful." Denise lowered her voice further. "Why are you so calm?" Olivia paused only for a second. "Because panic does not improve consequences." Denise opened her mouth, then stopped. She had managed hotel staff for 23 years. She knew arrogance when she saw it. Olivia did not have arrogance. She had something far stranger. Composure. The kind built from surviving things bigger than embarrassment. Back inside the ballroom, Nathaniel Reed remained seated at the VIP table while conversations slowly resumed around him. But something had shifted. The energy felt uneven now, controlled on the surface, fractured underneath. Nathaniel lifted his wine glass, but did not drink. Across from him, Martin Keller cleared his throat awkwardly. "Interesting girl." Nathaniel said nothing. Another investor laughed softly. "Well, New York certainly breeds confidence." Still nothing. Nathaniel's attention drifted toward the ballroom entrance where Olivia had disappeared moments earlier. Her voice replayed in his head with irritating clarity. But neither does dishonesty. The problem was not the insult. Men had challenged him before. Competitors, journalists, politicians. The problem was the certainty in her eyes. She had not sounded emotional. She had sounded informed. Beside Nathaniel, his chief legal advisor adjusted his glasses. "Nathaniel." "What?" "Did she see the acquisition files?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "No, are you sure?" Nathaniel finally looked at him. Cold gray eyes. Measured. Dangerous. "If I were not sure, Charles, you would already know." Charles nodded quickly and looked away. But the discomfort remained at the table like a hidden crack beneath expensive marble. Across the ballroom, Olivia resumed serving guests as though nothing had happened. A woman in diamonds handed her an empty glass without making eye contact. A senator thanked her absently for sparkling water. Somewhere near the orchestra stage, two young servers whispered while pretending to fold napkins. "She is getting fired tonight. Maybe arrested." Olivia heard both comments. Her expression never changed. Near 10 o'clock, the gala host announced the upcoming charity auction. Applause rolled politely across the ballroom while guests returned to their seats. Olivia approached the back VIP section carrying a tray of fresh champagne. As she stepped closer, she noticed something immediately. A black leather folder lay partially open beside Nathaniel Reed's chair. Financial documents, merger projections, legal summaries. One page slightly exposed beneath the dim chandelier light. Olivia should have looked away. Instead, her eyes caught a single line near the bottom of the page. SEC review pending. Her hand tightened slightly around the tray. Then another detail. A signature date that did not match the filing timeline. Olivia slowed almost imperceptibly. The numbers aligned too neatly. Too cleanly. Manufactured clean. Nathaniel noticed the shift instantly. Problem? He asked without looking up from his conversation. Olivia placed a champagne flute beside one of the guests. No, sir. But her eyes moved once more toward the folder before she turned away. Nathaniel saw that too. He leaned back slowly in his chair. Mississippi, Olivia stopped. The entire nearby section quieted automatically. Nathaniel gestured lightly toward the tray. You missed one. Olivia stepped back toward the table. Calm as ever. Nathaniel picked up the exposed document page between two fingers. You seem unusually interested in paperwork for someone serving drinks tonight. A few guests smiled nervously. Olivia met his gaze briefly. I noticed details. Clearly. He folded the paper once. Tell me something, Olivia. The way he said her name made several people glance between them immediately. Do you always make a habit of judging conversations you are not invited into? Olivia answered carefully. Only when the consequences affect people who are not in the room. Silence. Small. Sharp. Nathaniel studied her for several long seconds. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It was smooth enough to fool most people. Not warm enough to fool her. Interesting answer. Olivia gave a small nod and turned away again. But this time Nathaniel watched her longer. Not with irritation anymore. Curiosity. Dangerous curiosity. Because something about Olivia Carter refused to fit inside the neat categories he trusted. Waitresses apologized. Waitresses avoided eye contact. Waitresses feared powerful men. Olivia did none of those things. And for the first time that evening, Nathaniel Reed realized he no longer controlled the direction of the conversation. The charity auction began beneath a flood of golden light, as waiters carried silver trays between tables worth billions of dollars in combined net worth. A violinist played softly near the stage while enormous digital screens displayed photographs of children's hospitals, scholarship programs, and disaster relief campaigns funded by the Reed Foundation. The room applauded generously every few minutes. Money moved elegantly here, quietly, like power wearing a tuxedo. Olivia Carter stood near the service station beside the ballroom entrance, watching the room with calm gray-blue eyes. She memorized patterns automatically. Who interrupted people? Who avoided eye contact? Which couples were pretending to like each other? Which executives drank too fast when conversations shifted toward legal topics? Most people believed servers disappeared into the background. They forgot backgrounds still listened. You are shaking, whispered Emily, another waitress carrying dessert plates. Olivia glanced at her hand. Perfectly steady. No, she answered softly. Emily exhaled nervously. Nathaniel Reed has been staring at you for 20 minutes. Olivia reached for another tray. Then perhaps he should blink. Emily nearly laughed before stopping herself. How are you this calm? Olivia adjusted the sleeve of her black uniform. Because rich men confuse attention with power. Across the ballroom, Nathaniel Reed sat through the auction without hearing half the numbers being announced. $500,000 for a pediatric wing. $2 million for a Manhattan Arts program. Applause. Smiles. Cameras flashing. None of it held his attention for long. His eyes kept returning to Olivia. She moved through the ballroom with the same impossible composure. No visible fear. No attempt to apologize further. No effort to impress anyone. That unsettled him more than open hostility would have. You are distracted tonight, said Evelyn Whitmore quietly beside him. Nathaniel glanced toward her. Evelyn was in her 60s. Silver-haired. Brilliant. One of the few financial journalists he genuinely respected. Am I? You have looked at that waitress more than the auction stage. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. She made an accusation. No. Evelyn corrected calmly. She made an observation. Nathaniel's jaw shifted slightly. Evelyn lifted her wine glass. There is a difference. Before Nathaniel could answer, movement near the ballroom entrance drew attention. For men in dark suits entered alongside two federal compliance officers from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The atmosphere changed instantly. Tiny changes at first. Lawyers sat straighter. Conversations paused half-finished. One investor quietly lowered his phone beneath the table. Nathaniel's expression remained perfectly controlled. But Olivia noticed the exact moment his right hand stopped moving against the armrest. The compliance officers spoke briefly with hotel security before approaching the VIP section. No raised voices. No drama. Quiet authority always felt heavier. Charles Bennett, Nathaniel's chief legal advisor, stood immediately to greet them. Sweat glistened lightly near his collar despite the cool ballroom air. Olivia carried a tray of champagne closer to the section without appearing obvious. Mr. Reed, one of the officers said politely, we need clarification regarding pending disclosure documents tied to the Caraway acquisition. Nathaniel stood smoothly. Calm. Elegant. Untouchable. Of course, he answered. I was unaware tonight would include federal entertainment. A few nervous laughs fluttered nearby. Olivia saw through them instantly. Fear disguised as social politeness. The officer opened a thin black folder. There appears to be a discrepancy involving page 47 of the financial risk assessment. Silence. Tiny. Immediate. Olivia's eyes lowered briefly. Page 47. Nathaniel's gaze shifted across the ballroom. Straight toward her. Not coincidence anymore. Recognition. He understood exactly what had happened. Olivia had seen the document earlier. And somehow she had known. Charles stepped forward quickly. There must be some misunderstanding. The compliance officer remained polite. Then we are sure clarification will be simple. Cameras from several invited media guests slowly began turning toward the VIP area. Nathaniel noticed instantly. His voice lowered half a degree. Not here. Unfortunately, the officer replied calmly. The filing was submitted publicly 3 hours ago. That landed harder than shouting ever could. Olivia watched the entire table stiffen. One investor quietly set down his champagne glass untouched. Another looked toward the exits. The room no longer felt warm. Nathaniel remained frighteningly composed on the surface. But Olivia noticed details most people missed. The slight tightening near his jaw. The way his watch tapped once against the table edge. The tiny delay before each response. A man accustomed to absolute control was calculating too many outcomes at once. Evelyn Whitmore leaned toward Nathaniel carefully. You should have disclosed the exposure earlier. Nathaniel answered without looking at her. I do not take legal advice from reporters. Tonight, Evelyn said softly. You should probably take it from someone. Her eyes moved briefly toward Olivia. Nathaniel followed the glance. Olivia stood 20 feet away holding a silver tray beneath the chandelier light. Calm as ever. Watching quietly while billionaires and attorneys began whispering behind carefully controlled smiles. The orchestra had stopped playing entirely now. No one seemed to notice when it happened. One of the compliance officers requested access to the acquisition files immediately. Charles looked physically pale. Nathaniel buttoned his tuxedo jacket slowly. Then he did something unexpected. He walked directly across the ballroom toward Olivia Carter. Conversations died around him like candles losing oxygen. Olivia remained still as he approached. You saw the document, Nathaniel said quietly. Not a question. Olivia answered just as softly. You left it open. You recognized the filing issue. Yes. Nathaniel studied her face under the ballroom lights. Who exactly are you? Olivia held his gaze for a long moment before answering. Someone who reads page 47. And for the second time that night, Nathaniel Reed found himself standing in silence while the entire room watched. The ballroom no longer sounded like a celebration. The laughter had faded into low murmurs and nervous whispers that rolled beneath the chandeliers like distant thunder. Guests checked phones beneath tables. Attorneys gathered near corners, speaking in careful voices. The orchestra remained frozen beside the stage, instruments resting silently in their hands while wealthy strangers pretended not to stare at the unfolding disaster near the VIP section. Olivia Carter stood motionless with the silver tray balanced lightly against her palm. Nathaniel Reed remained directly in front of her, close enough now for her to notice details most people probably missed. The faint shadow beneath his eyes. The tiny crease near his collar where stress had finally interrupted perfection. Men like Nathaniel spent their entire lives controlling appearances. Tonight, the mask had shifted half an inch, and everyone in the room had noticed. Someone who reads page 47, Nathaniel repeated quietly. His voice remained smooth, but something colder lived underneath it now. Olivia gave a small nod. Yes, sir. Nathaniel studied her for another long moment. You recognized the SEC exposure in under 3 seconds. It was not hidden very well. That answer almost made him smile. Almost. Around them, several nearby guests pretended to continue conversations while openly listening. Nathaniel noticed immediately. Public humiliation irritated him. Public weakness disgusted him. He lowered his voice further. Walk with me. Olivia did not move at first. Sir, I am working. So am I. The answer landed between them like a challenge. After a brief pause, Olivia handed the tray to another server and followed Nathaniel across the ballroom toward a quieter corridor near the private conference suites. Their reflections moved side by side across polished marble floors beneath soft golden lighting. Expensive shoes, black uniform, two completely different worlds walking through the same silence. Nathaniel opened the door to a private lounge overlooking Central Park. The city lights glittered through massive windows beyond the snowfall outside. Inside, the room smelled faintly of leather, whiskey, and cedarwood. Olivia stepped inside carefully while Nathaniel closed the door behind them. The distant ballroom noise softened instantly. For the first time all night, they stood alone. Nathaniel loosened one cuff slowly. "Who trained you?" Olivia looked slightly confused. "Excuse me. You do not talk like hotel staff." "Neither do you." His eyes narrowed briefly. Olivia continued calmly. "Most billionaires do not personally confront waitresses in private lounges." Nathaniel moved toward the bar near the windows. "Most waitresses do not identify federal filing discrepancies during charity galas." He poured a glass of water instead of whiskey. "Interesting choice." Olivia noticed that too. "You saw the altered risk timeline," he continued. "That requires legal or financial training." Olivia remained standing near the doorway. "Observation does not require a degree." Nathaniel turned toward her slowly. "No, but certainty does." The room fell quiet again. Snow drifted outside the windows above Manhattan traffic lights, glowing red and white beneath the storm. Nathaniel finally spoke first. "Were you planning to report it?" Olivia answered honestly. "No," that surprised him. "Why not?" Olivia looked toward the ballroom through the glass doors. "Because I do not know the full story yet." Nathaniel stared at her carefully. "Most people would already be negotiating. For money. For leverage." Olivia shook her head once. "Leverage only matters if you enjoy controlling people." Nathaniel laughed softly under his breath. Not mocking this time. "Tired. You really do not fear me." Olivia met his eyes directly. "I think powerful men confuse fear with silence." The words settled heavily between them. Nathaniel looked away first. He walked toward the windows, hands resting lightly in his pockets while the city stretched below him like an empire built from light. "Do you know how many people depend on Reed Capital?" he asked quietly. Olivia did not answer immediately. "Thousands," he continued. "Employees, retirement funds, hospitals, entire companies." And Nathaniel turned slightly. "And one public investigation destroys confidence faster than facts." Olivia watched him carefully now. For the first time all evening, she heard exhaustion beneath the polished control. Not innocence, not honesty, just pressure. The unbearable weight men like him carried while pretending not to feel anything at all. "You are trying to justify the filing delay," she said softly. Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly again. "I am trying to survive Wall Street." Olivia folded her hands lightly in front of her. "There is a difference." Silence returned. Nathaniel stared at her with growing frustration because she refused to behave predictably. She did not flirt, did not panic, did not moralize dramatically. She simply stood there speaking truth in the quietest possible voice. That unsettled him more than anger ever could. A knock interrupted the tension. Charles Bennett entered quickly without waiting long enough for permission. His face looked pale beneath the ballroom lighting behind him. "Nathaniel." He stopped immediately after noticing Olivia still inside the lounge. "The compliance officers are requesting immediate access to the internal projections." Nathaniel remained calm. "Then give them what is legally required." Charles hesitated. "The revised projections or the originals?" Olivia saw the exact second Nathaniel realized she was still listening. Charles realized it too late. The room went still, completely still. Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Leave us," he said quietly. Charles swallowed hard. "Nathaniel, now." Charles nodded once and disappeared immediately, closing the door behind him. The silence afterward felt heavier than before. Olivia slowly looked toward Nathaniel. He did not speak for several seconds. Then finally, very softly, he asked, "How much did you hear?" Olivia answered with perfect calm. "Enough." Nathaniel stared at her across the room, while snow continued falling beyond the windows. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Reed realized that the most dangerous person in the building was not a federal investigator, a journalist, or a rival billionaire. It was the quiet waitress who never raised her voice. The silence inside the private lounge stretched long after Charles Bennett disappeared behind the door. Snow continued drifting past the towering windows beyond Central Park, while muted ballroom music slowly resumed somewhere in the distance. Nathaniel Reed stood near the bar with one hand resting against the polished wood, his reflection faintly visible in the dark glass behind him. Olivia Carter remained near the doorway, calm as ever, though the air between them had changed completely now. This was no longer a conversation between a billionaire and a waitress. It was something far more dangerous. Two people standing on opposite sides of the same truth. Nathaniel finally broke the silence. You understand what happens if this investigation becomes public? Olivia answered carefully. I understand what happens when people believe rules only apply to everyone else. Nathaniel looked toward her sharply. You think this is greed? I think it is fear. That answer surprised him enough to pause. Olivia stepped slightly farther into the room, her black uniform almost blending into the shadows beneath the warm lighting. Greedy people celebrate risk, she continued softly. Fearful people hide it. Nathaniel studied her expression, searching for judgment, anger, superiority. He found none of those things, only observation. That unsettled him more every minute. You speak like someone who has been inside rooms like this before, he said quietly. Olivia gave the smallest hint of a smile. Rooms like this are all the same. And what exactly does that mean? Expensive people pretending money protects them from consequences. Nathaniel exhaled once through his nose. Almost a laugh. Almost frustration. You really enjoy provoking me. Olivia shook her head gently. No, sir. You only notice me when I stop agreeing with you. Before Nathaniel could answer, another knock sounded against the lounge door. This time it opened slowly. Evelyn Whitmore stepped inside, carrying a thin tablet beneath her arm. Her silver hair caught the warm light as she glanced between Nathaniel and Olivia with immediate understanding. I had a feeling this is where the interesting conversation was happening. Nathaniel straightened slightly. This is private. Nothing involving federal compliance officers stays private for long, Evelyn replied calmly. Her experienced journalist eyes moved toward Olivia. And you must be the woman everyone in the ballroom is talking about. Olivia remained polite. I am just working tonight. Evelyn smiled faintly. No, you were working earlier. Now you are changing the emotional climate of the entire hotel. Nathaniel moved away from the bar. Evelyn, if you came here to write a headline, relax, she interrupted softly. If I wanted to destroy you publicly, I would still be downstairs near the cameras. Her tone shifted slightly more serious. I came because your legal team looks terrified. Nathaniel said nothing. Evelyn turned toward Olivia again. And because I have been trying to figure out who recognizes SEC filing irregularities from 6 feet away while carrying champagne. Olivia lowered her eyes briefly. Observation. No. Evelyn corrected gently. Training. The room grew quiet again. Nathaniel watched Olivia carefully now. He had spent his entire career reading weakness in people. Hesitation. Ego. Desperation. But Olivia Carter revealed almost nothing. That alone made her powerful. Evelyn stepped closer. What law school? Olivia looked at her for a moment without answering. Nathaniel noticed it immediately. Silence with purpose. Columbia. Evelyn guessed softly. Olivia's expression changed almost invisibly. Nathaniel saw it. So did Evelyn. The older woman's eyes widened slightly in recognition. Wait. She studied Olivia more carefully now. Olivia Carter. Nathaniel glanced between them. Evelyn lowered the tablet slowly beneath her arm. 3 years ago. Her voice softened with genuine surprise. You were the youngest legal analyst invited into the Federal Corporate Ethics Fellowship. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed immediately toward Olivia. Evelyn continued quietly, almost speaking to herself now. Top of your class. Financial compliance specialization. Professors said you could dismantle acquisition fraud faster than senior attorneys. Olivia remained still. Nathaniel stared at her. You went from federal legal fellowship to hotel waitress. Olivia answered calmly. Life changes. Nathaniel took another slow step closer. That is not an answer. For the first time all evening, something flickered behind Olivia's eyes. Not fear. Pain. Quiet and controlled. My younger brother died during a pharmaceutical corruption investigation, she said softly. After that, I stopped believing intelligent people automatically win. The room fell completely silent. Even Evelyn looked momentarily shaken. Olivia continued without drama, which somehow made the words heavier. I spent 2 years helping companies manipulate regulations while pretending they cared about ethics. Eventually, I realized everyone in those rooms already knew the truth. Nathaniel's expression tightened slightly. Olivia met his eyes directly now. Including men like you. Nathaniel looked away first. The city lights shimmered across the windows behind him, while distant sirens echoed faintly somewhere far below Manhattan traffic. Evelyn folded her arms slowly. Nathaniel. He did not respond. Page 47, she said carefully. How bad is it really? Nathaniel remained silent for several long seconds. Then finally, quietly, he answered, bad enough. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Olivia watched him carefully now, seeing something the ballroom never would. Not arrogance. Exhaustion. The kind built from carrying too many decisions for too many years while convincing the world's certainty with strength. Nathaniel rubbed one hand slowly across his jaw before speaking again. The acquisition was already collapsing 6 months ago, he admitted quietly. If investors saw the original exposure projections, 20,000 employees across 3 companies would lose jobs before Christmas. Olivia listened without interrupting. Nathaniel's voice lowered further. So yes, we delayed disclosure. The confession settled heavily into the room. No excuses left now. Just truth. Evelyn stared at him in disbelief. Olivia remained calm. Nathaniel looked toward her again. Now you know the full story. Olivia answered softly. No, sir. Nathaniel frowned slightly. What does that mean? Olivia looked toward the ballroom doors where distant laughter tried unsuccessfully to sound normal again. It means I still have not decided whether you are the villain in it. The room remained silent long after Olivia Carter spoke the words. It means I still have not decided whether you are the villain in it. Snow pressed softly against the giant windows overlooking Manhattan, while the private lounge filled with the quiet tension of truths nobody could comfortably escape anymore. Nathaniel Reed stood motionless near the bar, one hand resting lightly against the polished wood. Evelyn Whitmore watched both of them carefully, her sharp journalist instincts already understanding something unusual was unfolding tonight. Not scandal. Something far more dangerous. Perspective. Nathaniel lowered his eyes briefly before speaking. Most people decide much faster. Olivia answered softly. Most people only want someone to blame. Evelyn moved slowly toward one of the leather chairs near the windows. And what do you want, Olivia? Olivia considered the question for a moment. Honesty. Nathaniel gave a faint, humorless smile. That is expensive in my world. No. Olivia corrected gently. It is expensive in every world. The quiet landed harder than anger would have. Before anyone could speak again, Nathaniel's phone vibrated sharply against the bar counter. He glanced down at the screen. Charles Bennett. 3 missed calls already. Nathaniel answered immediately. What? Charles sounded strained even through the speaker. The SEC officers are requesting a formal statement tonight. Nathaniel's expression darkened slightly. On what basis? Anonymous disclosure attachments were submitted with the filing. Olivia's eyes lifted instantly. Nathaniel noticed. What attachments? Charles hesitated. Internal projection summaries. The room changed. Nathaniel's jaw tightened visibly now. That information was restricted. I know. Charles lowered his voice. And financial media already has rumors. Evelyn slowly straightened from her chair. How widespread? 3 networks so far. Social media picked it up 10 minutes ago. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Just once. Then the billionaire mask returned immediately. Calm. Cold. Controlled. Contain it. We are trying. Nathaniel ended the call without another word. Silence filled the lounge again. Olivia watched him carefully. For the first time all evening, he looked tired enough to be human. Nathaniel loosened his tie slightly before turning toward Evelyn. You already know what happens next. Evelyn nodded once. Markets panic by morning. And if investors pull out? Then the acquisition collapses. Olivia spoke quietly from near the doorway. Which means the layoffs become real. Nathaniel looked toward her sharply. Yes. Olivia folded her arms lightly against herself. So someone leaked the original projections. Nathaniel gave a cold laugh under his breath. Welcome to corporate America. Evelyn crossed one leg slowly. Do you know who did it? Nathaniel stared out toward the snow-covered skyline. Not yet. Olivia watched him carefully. But you suspect someone. Nathaniel did not answer immediately. Then finally, People become moral when money stops flowing. The ballroom noise beyond the doors had shifted completely now. Earlier it sounded elegant, controlled, wealthy. Now it sounded nervous, restless. Fear traveled quickly through rooms full of powerful people. A soft knock interrupted the silence again. Denise stepped carefully into the lounge, visibly anxious the second she saw Nathaniel Reed still inside with Olivia. "Olivia," she whispered urgently. "The hotel manager is asking for you." Olivia nodded once. "I will be right there." Denise hesitated awkwardly before leaving again. Nathaniel looked toward Olivia as she prepared to step out of the room. "Wait." She paused. Nathaniel's voice lowered slightly. "Did you leak the projections?" The question hung in the air quietly. Evelyn looked between them without speaking. Olivia answered immediately. No. Nathaniel held her gaze. Searching. Measuring. Olivia did not flinch. Finally, he nodded once. "I believe you." That surprised all three of them. Most of all Nathaniel himself. Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Why?" Nathaniel gave a faint smile that never fully reached his eyes. "Because if you wanted to destroy me, you would have done it publicly hours ago." The room fell quiet again. Olivia looked at him differently after that. Not softer, just more honestly. Denise appeared again outside the glass doors, clearly panicking now. "Olivia, please." Olivia nodded apologetically toward Evelyn before turning to leave. But just before reaching the door, Nathaniel spoke again. "You asked earlier whether I was the villain." Olivia stopped without turning around. Nathaniel's voice sounded quieter than before. Less like a billionaire. More like a man carrying something heavy alone for too long. If those companies collapse tomorrow, 20,000 people lose jobs before Christmas. Olivia slowly turned back toward him. Nathaniel continued carefully. "Some of them worked for my father before me. Some have children in college. Medical insurance. Mortgages." He looked toward the glowing city outside the windows. "Wall Street calls it exposure percentages." His jaw tightened slightly. "I call them names." The honesty in his voice changed something inside the room. Evelyn noticed it immediately. Olivia did too. Men like Nathaniel Reed rarely admitted emotional truth out loud. Especially not in private. Especially not to someone beneath their social status. Olivia studied him for several long seconds before speaking softly. "And hiding the projections was supposed to save them?" Nathaniel answered honestly. "I told myself it would buy time." "Did it?" He looked at her. Really looked at her this time. No performance left. No arrogance. "I do not know anymore." Outside the lounge, ballroom guests continued whispering beneath chandeliers while reporters waited for statements and investors quietly calculated losses on glowing phone screens. But inside the private room above Manhattan, something far more dangerous was happening. Nathaniel Reed was no longer trying to win the conversation. And Olivia Carter was beginning to realize that the most frightening people were not always cruel. Sometimes they were simply exhausted men who made terrible decisions while trying to hold collapsing worlds together. Olivia Carter stepped back into the ballroom carrying a fresh tray of champagne, as if nothing inside the private lounge had changed her. But the room felt completely different now. Conversations had become sharper, faster. Wealthy men who once laughed comfortably beneath the chandeliers now whispered behind tense smiles while scrolling through financial headlines on glowing phone screens. Reporters near the ballroom entrance pretended to admire the holiday decorations while quietly recording voice memos. Fear had entered the gala wearing an expensive suit, and everyone could feel it. Olivia moved carefully between tables while servers around her exchanged nervous glances. "What is happening?" Emily whispered while adjusting silverware with trembling hands. Olivia handed a guest fresh, sparkling water before answering softly. "People are realizing money does not stop consequences." Emily looked toward the VIP section where attorneys huddled near Nathaniel Reed. "Is he going to be arrested?" Olivia shook her head gently. "No, how do you know?" Olivia glanced briefly toward Nathaniel across the ballroom. "Because powerful men rarely fall all at once." Near midnight, the orchestra resumed another soft jazz arrangement in a desperate attempt to restore elegance to the evening. But the music sounded thin now, artificial, like a band playing calmly on a ship already taking on water. Nathaniel Reed stood near the center ballroom staircase, speaking quietly with compliance officers while cameras flashed from a distance. His posture remained perfect, calm, controlled. But Olivia noticed the exhaustion settling deeper into his face every minute. Earlier that night, he looked untouchable. Now he looked human. That frightened people more. Evelyn Whitmore approached Olivia near the service station, holding two untouched champagne glasses. "You changed the emotional balance of a billionaire gala in under 3 hours," she said softly. Olivia accepted one glass only to place it immediately onto a passing tray. "That was not my intention." Evelyn smiled faintly. Intentions rarely matter once truth enters a room. Olivia looked toward Nathaniel again. "People already decided who he is." Evelyn followed her gaze. "And you have not." Olivia remained quiet for a moment. "I think he made a terrible decision." "That is not the same thing." "No." Evelyn studied her carefully. "You still believe there is something decent left in him?" Olivia answered honestly. "I believe exhausted people sometimes convince themselves survival is morality." Before Evelyn could respond, sudden movement near the ballroom entrance shifted the room again. Charles Bennett rushed quickly across the marble floor holding a tablet in one shaking hand. He moved directly toward Nathaniel and whispered something urgently into his ear. Olivia watched Nathaniel's expression change instantly. Not panic. Worse, recognition. Nathaniel took the tablet from Charles and stared at the screen for several long seconds. The color drained slightly from his face. "Who released this?" he asked quietly. Charles swallowed hard. "Someone uploaded internal board emails." Nathaniel looked up slowly. "To who?" "Everyone." A heavy silence spread across the nearby guests who overheard enough to understand disaster was accelerating. Nathaniel handed the tablet back sharply before walking away from the crowd without another word. Straight toward Olivia. The entire ballroom seemed to notice at once. He stopped directly in front of her beneath the massive crystal chandelier at the center of the room. Hundreds of tiny lights reflected across polished marble around them. "I need to ask you something," Nathaniel said quietly. Olivia met his eyes calmly. "All right. And I need an honest answer." "You will get one." Nathaniel lowered his voice further. "If you had access to evidence proving I manipulated the projections intentionally." He paused briefly. "Would you expose me publicly?" Several nearby conversations faded as guests subtly leaned closer without appearing obvious. Olivia answered carefully. "That depends." Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. "On what?" Olivia looked around the ballroom slowly. "Wealthy donors, nervous executives, hotel staff pretending not to listen. On whether exposing you protects innocent people," she said softly. Nathaniel stared at her for several seconds without speaking. Then finally, "And if it destroys thousands of jobs instead?" Olivia held his gaze. "Then the system was already broken before I arrived." The words landed hard enough to silence even the nearby tables. Nathaniel looked away briefly toward the ballroom windows where snow continued falling over Manhattan. "You know what the worst part is?" he asked quietly. Olivia said nothing. Nathaniel gave a tired laugh under his breath. 3 years ago, I would have agreed with you." That surprised her. Nathaniel continued softly, almost speaking to himself now. "When my father ran Reed Capital, he believed ethics were good business. He believed honesty built stronger companies." His eyes darkened slightly. "Then the market destroyed him for being too transparent during a recession." Olivia listened carefully while Nathaniel's voice lowered another degree. "I spent the last decade convincing myself survival mattered more than principles." He looked directly at her again. "Tonight you made me realize I stopped recognizing the difference." The ballroom around them had gone nearly silent now. Even the orchestra slowed uncertainly while guests openly watched the strange conversation between Manhattan's most powerful CEO and the quiet waitress who somehow stood without fear in front of him. Olivia noticed something then. Nathaniel was no longer defending himself. He was confessing, and somehow that felt far more dangerous. A reporter near the ballroom entrance suddenly raised her voice toward Nathaniel. "Mr. Reed, are the leaked emails authentic?" Cameras turned immediately. Flashing lights exploded across the ballroom. Attorneys moved quickly toward him while investors began stepping away from the VIP area entirely. Panic traveled fast now. Nathaniel remained motionless for one long second beneath the chandelier light. Then he looked toward Olivia one final time before the crowd swallowed him again. "You asked whether I was the villain," he said quietly. "I think tonight I finally became honest enough to answer." Camera flashes exploded across the ballroom like bursts of white lightning, while reporters pushed closer toward Nathaniel Reed near the grand staircase. The elegant charity gala had transformed completely now. No one cared about the auction anymore. Half-empty champagne glasses sat abandoned across linen-covered tables, while wealthy investors quietly checked stock futures beneath the glow of their phones. The orchestra had stopped again, this time permanently. Mr. Reed, did you knowingly suppress financial exposure reports? Are the leaked emails authentic? Will Reed Capital survive federal investigation? The questions crashed into each other from every direction. Nathaniel stood perfectly still beneath the chandelier light, while attorneys crowded around him trying to block cameras. But for the first time all night, he no longer looked angry. He looked tired. Olivia Carter watched from near the service station with one hand resting lightly against a silver tray. Around her, hotel staff whispered nervously while managers rushed between security teams and media coordinators. Denise appeared beside Olivia carrying folded napkins she clearly forgot she was holding. "This place is falling apart," she whispered. Olivia looked calmly toward the ballroom. "No," Denise frowned slightly. "What do you mean, no?" Olivia's eyes remained fixed on Nathaniel. It was already falling apart. Tonight people are just seeing it. Denise stared at her for a moment before shaking her head slowly. "You really are not afraid of any of these people?" Olivia answered softly. "I used to be." Across the ballroom, Nathaniel finally raised one hand slightly toward the reporters. The room quieted almost immediately. Power still lived inside his voice even now. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, "there will be a formal statement issued tomorrow morning after legal review." Reporters shouted more questions instantly. Nathaniel continued anyway. "Tonight was intended to support families and charities across New York City. I would appreciate if we remembered that before turning this ballroom into a courtroom." A few guests nodded uncomfortably. Others looked away. Olivia noticed something important then. Nathaniel was not denying the allegations anymore. Even his lawyers looked unsettled by that. Evelyn Whitmore moved quietly toward Olivia once more. "He is changing." Olivia looked toward her. "People only change when maintaining the mask becomes more painful than removing it." Evelyn studied her carefully. "You speak like someone who learned that lesson personally." Olivia remained silent. Evelyn smiled faintly. "You know, I spent 30 years interviewing billionaires." Her eyes drifted toward Nathaniel. "Most powerful men would still be lying right now." Olivia watched Nathaniel answer another reporter with surprising calm. "Maybe he is just tired." "No," Evelyn said quietly. "He is ashamed." The words settled heavily between them. Shame. Real shame. Not public embarrassment. Not fear of losing money. Something deeper. Across the ballroom, Charles Bennett rushed toward Nathaniel again, carrying another phone. His expression looked almost panicked now. Nathaniel listened briefly before closing his eyes for one long second. Then he handed the phone back and dismissed him with a small gesture. "What now?" Evelyn asked quietly. Olivia noticed the shift in Nathaniel immediately. "The board." Sure enough, moments later, several members of Reed Capital's executive board began quietly exiting the ballroom without speaking to him. Men who spent years standing beside Nathaniel now avoided eye contact entirely while slipping toward private elevators. Olivia watched the scene carefully. Wealth always looked strongest right before loyalty disappeared. Nathaniel saw it too. One by one, investors drifted away from him beneath the glittering ballroom lights. Conversations changed direction the second he approached. Smiles became strained. Handshakes shortened. Fear had entered the room fully now, and fear always hunted alone. Then something unexpected happened. Nathaniel walked away from the reporters entirely, away from his attorneys, away from the remaining investors, straight toward the service corridor where Olivia stood. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath again as Manhattan's most powerful CEO crossed the marble floor toward the waitress he publicly embarrassed hours earlier. Nathaniel stopped in front of her quietly. No cameras close enough now. No microphones. Just soft ballroom noise behind them. Olivia met his eyes calmly. Nathaniel glanced briefly toward the tray in her hands. "You are still working. People still need glasses cleared." For the first time all evening, a real smile almost touched his face. "Small. Tired. Human." Nathaniel lowered his voice. "The board is preparing to force my resignation by morning." Olivia did not react dramatically. "I assumed they would." Nathaniel studied her expression carefully. "You really do not care about status, do you?" Olivia answered honestly. "I care about what people become because of it." The silence afterward felt strangely peaceful compared to the chaos surrounding them. Nathaniel looked around the ballroom slowly. Wealthy strangers pretending not to stare. Reporters whispering near cameras. Crystal chandeliers reflecting across polished marble floors that suddenly felt cold. "Do you know what the strange part is?" he asked quietly. Olivia waited. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. "I spent 15 years protecting this company." His eyes drifted toward the executives leaving through the private elevators. "And the only honest conversation I have had tonight was with a waitress." Olivia looked at him carefully now. Not as a billionaire. Not as a scandal. Just a man finally exhausted enough to stop performing. Nathaniel continued softly. "Earlier tonight, I asked whether you belonged in a room like this." Olivia remained silent. Nathaniel looked directly into her eyes beneath the chandelier light. "I think I asked the wrong person." The words landed gently. No arrogance left inside them now. No mockery. Only realization. Nearby, Denise stood frozen beside the service station, pretending not to listen, while several guests openly watched the conversation in stunned silence. Nathaniel Reed straightened his jacket slowly before stepping back. "There will be a press conference tomorrow morning," he said quietly. "I am going to tell the truth." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "That will cost you everything." Nathaniel gave a faint, tired smile. No, he glanced around the ballroom one final time. Keeping the lie already did. By 1:30 in the morning, the ballroom looked like the aftermath of a storm nobody expected to survive. Half the tables stood empty beneath the fading chandelier light. Melted ice floated inside abandoned champagne buckets, while exhausted hotel staff quietly collected untouched desserts and folded linen napkins no one remembered using. Outside the towering windows, snow continued falling over Manhattan in soft white silence, covering black streets and flashing police lights alike. The charity gala was over, but the truth it exposed had only just begun. Olivia Carter stood near the back service station, carefully stacking crystal glasses onto a silver tray. Her movements remained calm, precise, the same way they had been all night. Around her, servers whispered about headlines already spreading online. Reed capital scandal. Federal investigation. Possible resignation. Billionaire under pressure. Denise approached, carrying a clipboard against her chest like armor. "You should probably leave before reporters start asking about you too," she whispered. Olivia placed another glass carefully onto the tray. "I still have 20 minutes left on my shift." Denise stared at her in disbelief. "You really are something else." Olivia gave a faint smile. "No, I just know panic does not clean ballroom floors." Denise laughed softly before shaking her head and walking away. Across the nearly empty room, Nathaniel Reed stood alone near the grand staircase, staring out toward the city skyline beyond the windows. Most of the investors had disappeared already. So had the board members. The attorneys remained nearby, speaking urgently into phones, but Nathaniel no longer seemed interested in their conversations. Earlier that evening, he looked like the center of the room. Now he looked like a man standing quietly beside the ruins of his own empire. Evelyn Whitmore approached him one final time, adjusting the long gray coat draped over her shoulders. "The press conference tomorrow will be brutal," she said softly. Nathaniel nodded once. "I know. You still have time to fight this publicly." Nathaniel looked toward the ballroom floor, where hotel staff quietly cleaned around them. "That is the problem, Evelyn." His voice sounded tired now, honest in a way she had never heard before. "I have spent 15 years fighting everything." Evelyn studied him carefully. "And tonight?" Nathaniel's eyes drifted toward Olivia in the distance. "Tonight someone reminded me there is a difference between protecting people and protecting pride." Evelyn followed his gaze. "Interesting woman." Nathaniel gave the smallest nod. "Yes." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Do not make the mistake of romanticizing her because she challenged you." Nathaniel looked back toward the snow outside. "I am not." His voice lowered slightly. "I respect her because she did not." Evelyn understood immediately. Olivia never chased his approval, never feared his money, never tried to use his attention for status. In rooms full of people desperate to impress Nathaniel Reed, the quiet waitress had been the only person willing to tell him the truth. Evelyn touched his arm lightly before leaving for the elevators. "Good luck tomorrow." Nathaniel watched her disappear into the marble hallway before turning slowly toward the ballroom one final time. Most of the lights had dimmed now. Staff moved quietly beneath soft gold reflections, while distant vacuum cleaners hummed somewhere near the lobby. Olivia stood alone near the center tables collecting the last champagne glasses. Nathaniel walked toward her without hesitation. She noticed him immediately, but continued stacking glasses calmly. "You are still here," he said softly. Olivia adjusted another crystal flute onto the tray. "So are you." Nathaniel glanced around the nearly empty ballroom. Everyone else left. People leave quickly when power stops protecting them. He gave a quiet laugh under his breath. "You always speak like you are reading invisible footnotes beneath conversations." Olivia looked at him briefly. "Most people reveal themselves when they are afraid." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "Then tonight must have been educational." Olivia finally looked directly at him beneath the fading chandelier light. A little. Silence settled gently between them. Not uncomfortable anymore. Just honest. Nathaniel reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and removed a small white envelope. He placed it carefully on the table beside her tray. Olivia glanced at it without touching it. "What is that?" "A job offer." Olivia blinked once, surprised despite herself. Nathaniel continued quietly. "Not because you embarrassed me. Not because you exposed my mistakes." His eyes remained steady on hers. "Because you were the only person in the building who understood what was happening and still chose to think before reacting." Olivia looked down at the envelope again. "You are offering legal work to a waitress in the middle of a federal scandal." "I am offering work to the smartest person I met tonight." The words landed softly. No performance behind them. No manipulation. Just truth. Olivia studied him carefully for a long moment. "You realize your board would hate that?" Nathaniel gave a faint smile. "My board already hates many things tonight." Against the windows behind them, snow continued drifting across Manhattan while workers quietly shut down ballroom lights section by section. The room slowly darkened around them. Olivia finally slid the envelope back toward Nathaniel gently. "I cannot accept this tonight." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "Why?" Olivia answered softly. "Because right now you are trying to repair guilt." The honesty of the answer might have embarrassed another man. Nathaniel only nodded slowly. "You are probably right." Olivia lifted the tray of crystal glasses carefully into her arms. Nathaniel stepped aside automatically to let her pass. But before she walked away, he spoke once more. "Earlier tonight, I asked whether you belonged in rooms like this." Olivia paused quietly. Nathaniel looked around the silent ballroom. Empty tables. Fading lights. Abandoned luxury scattered beneath crystal chandeliers. "I think the real problem," he said softly, "is that rooms like this forgot how to deserve people like you." Olivia held his gaze for one long moment. Then she gave the smallest smile of the night. Calm. Genuine. "Good night, Mr. Reed." "Nathaniel," he corrected gently. Olivia adjusted the tray against her arms before walking toward the service corridor beneath the dim ballroom lights. Nathaniel watched her disappear quietly into the hallway where staff coats hung beside industrial kitchen doors and tired workers prepared to go home before sunrise. No dramatic music played. No applause filled the room. Just silence. Honest silence. And for the first time in many years, Nathaniel Reed realized the most powerful person he met that night was the woman who never once tried to look powerful at all.